Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 385 for Monday, January 19th, 2026. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version that goes out on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me from a galaxy very, very near is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
We are here. Welcome to our planet, I guess. We've been talking sci-fi, if you haven't guessed, in the Render Distance, which is the extended version of the podcast that you get every week if you're a patron. Check out patreon.com/thespawnchunks to support the show and get bonus content like that every week. We were talking about Stillfleet, which is a tabletop RPG set in a sci-fi universe, and Three Body Problem, which is a series based on books that's on Netflix right now. I just finished the first season. Johnny has also watched the first season and read the books. So we're talking about that spoiler free because we just think it's so good that you should just check it out, and we didn't want to ruin that for anyone. So those are the kind of things that we talk about on the Render Distance. And if you're a patron, you also get access to things like the monthly Minecraft Hangout, which is where we hang out with our patrons and talk about what they've been doing in Minecraft. The next one of those is coming up on Saturday, January 31st. We also do a quarterly hangout where we talk about the downloads, the YouTube views, the different metrics behind the scenes on the podcast, and that should be happening in early February. And that's going to be a recap of Q4 as well as a recap of 2025 as a whole.
We're going to have to rewire our brains from all of this sci-fi talk to talk about fantasy this time around, because while it's been a fairly short technical snapshot this week from the Mojang team, following up on last week's Baby Mobs, it's been pretty quiet on the Minecraft front, so Joel and I have both been checking out the early access release of Hytale this week, and we thought a cool discussion for the podcast would be what Minecraft could learn from what Hytale does a little bit differently, and conversely, how Hytale can learn from Minecraft. So we're going to get into that in our main discussion, but first of all, back to sci-fi briefly for a check-in with you, Joel. What's new on the Mushroom Island on the Citadel?
I have been taking a page from your book, and I have been digging a hole, as one does in Minecraft. Inevitably, you have to dig a hole somewhere. And I mentioned last week that I was working on the designs of the power core that I want to put in the middle of the command center. And I want that Star Wars vibe of being next to some really strange-looking pillar/pit that you see in things like Cloud City, the Death Star. I don't know if they have them on the actual starships, but like any kind of big base in Star Wars, you tend to have these large pits for ventilation, I guess, whatever they are. And I wanted to have something like that in the middle of my command center. And in order to achieve the effect, which is that the center core kind of disappears into perspective in the basement, you have to dig down far enough that you can't see the bottom of the other wall when you're standing on the edge, and that means you really have to go down pretty far. So I've just kind of started at the beginning of every stream hanging out with chat, talking and digging out a couple of layers, usually about 4 or 5. And I only had time to do that once this week because I spent the rest of the week playing Hytale. But I've made some progress. I think I dug out about 10 layers. I am not looking forward to running into Deep Slate. I think that's going to become slow, even though I have top tier pickaxes and I have beacons in the area. So I'm always on haste. I'm crossing my fingers that I run into a lush cave or something that might kind of like expedite the process a little bit. But I'm going to have to dig down pretty far. I don't know if I have to go all the way to bedrock. I might just do it for fun, just for the pure aesthetic of it. But right now we're just going to go down at least until I can figure out, the right perspective on it. I don't know if I'm going to put any kind of effects in the bottom of it. I might just try to make it look as black as I can. Maybe I put, that tiered glass effect, but I use black glass or something, or I use tinted glass, just anything to kind of like make it look like it goes into infinity or like the core of the planet. Maybe it could be kind of fun. I don't know. I haven't really worked out any lore there. But on the top of it, I want to put some sort of crystal or some sort of structure. So it's not going to be flat and even with the floor. There's going to be something in the middle of the room that you kind of have to walk around. One, I want it to block the view of the doors across from you, but also I just kind of want something in the middle of the room to point up, because a lot of the design of the command center is going to be above you. And so I want something to kind of lead your eye up into the sky. And I have no idea what it's going to look like. Pointy, round, square, I don't know. So we'll figure that out when we get to it.
I think, honestly, it's looking great so far, though. Just the monolithic design nature of it is so great. Yeah, like I think the cool thing about this as well is from the outside, when you're like approaching the structure, you just think, oh, this has just kind of been parked on top of the landscape, and that's where the floor ends. And then obviously when you get inside, either because it's been excavated or because, you know, it's got some kind of structure that when it lands, it drills down into the foundation of things to secure it. You know, you can extrapolate from the design element of that. Oh, because there's this hole in the floor, clearly there's some part of the ship that is below the ground. And I think that's fascinating. I think that's a really fun way of incorporating it into the terrain and also adding to the fiction of it just through environmental storytelling. And yeah, I think design decisions like this, they feel like big swings and they feel like a lot of effort at the time, but they always pay off when it comes to the monolithic nature of the design of something this large.
Thanks. And I thought about putting more stuff below ground. Like I've thought about different floors, like subfloors and stuff like that. But ultimately, if I do that, because this place is already so big, I could end up putting all the things I need in this one location. And that's kind of boring for me
Yeah, not what you
from
wanted.
a perspective of like, I want to walk around this mushroom island, control the environment, change the landscape, and have like my smelter in one building and my bamboo farm in another building, and just try to come up with a bunch of give me more opportunities to design more sci-fi buildings, really is what I want. And if I just start putting them rooms inside the basement, then it just kind of defeats the purpose, because I already have enough room in these giant, I call them wings. They're not really like flight wings, but they're the command center like wing hallways of the north, south, east, and west. They're really big, and so I've got enough room to do stuff in there. But we'll see how it goes. I'm just kind of logging in from time to time and filling in like dirt platforms and scaffolding and stuff like that to try to get those ready for whenever the next big idea hits. Because I really, at this point, I don't have a function for the inside of the other wings. I'm trying to leave some of them open because we don't know what's coming from Minecraft in the next few months. So we'll have to see. I do want to at least get to the point where they don't look terrible in a screenshot. So I might at least design the facade of them, but we'll see.
At this point, with what's coming in Minecraft that we know about, one of them's going to be a playpen for baby animals. There's sort of the ship's petting zoo to keep everybody occupied and, like, you know, have some time around some cute animals while they're in deep space or something. One thing I could recommend from my experience this week is make one of them a fish tank, because I have been effectively forcing myself to spend time with the Nautilus, knowing that my main projects aren't really going to be things that keep me ocean bound for very long. So I decided to go out and find the Nautili, which I mentioned in the last episode. The Nautilus is, apparently, I've been corrected on the plural a couple of times. Who cares? You'll know what I mean. I have found the Coral Nautilus and both of the other variants. So I have the regular one, of course, but then the zombie Nautilus I was able to track down in an ocean nearer the Windy City, having airlifted the Coral zombie Nautilus back to the Windy City using the Happy Ghast. So last week I mentioned bringing the Happy Ghast over to it using an allay leashed to it. On the way back, I decided to ditch the allay and just leash myself to the Happy Ghast, or leash the Happy Ghast to me, get up as far as like build height or like just above the clouds really, and then glide home myself, making sure I didn't rocket boost because that breaks leads now. But then that allowed me to, you know, just glide at a certain height and drag the Happy Ghast along with me with the Coral Zombie Nautilus armored up so it didn't burn in the sun. But with zombie Nautiluses, they don't need to breathe, so I didn't need to worry about it like suffocating if it was being dragged that way. So we got it home to the Windy City. It took a little while, but I managed it with a couple of resets of my height just to make sure we didn't graze any mountaintops or jungle trees or anything like that. And so it took maybe like 15-20 minutes to get home in total, which was not too bad. And I built a coral fish tank for it inside of what was going to be, or might still be, the lighthouse build that I had planned on the cliff top in the Windy City. I imagined it being more like an airship dock, since we are fairly landlocked in that area. So instead of being a lighthouse for boats, it's a lighthouse for airships. And so I thought, to kind of keep it in the style of like reminding you of aquatic environments, I thought, let's make the bottom layer of that into a fish tank. So that's where I built this little kind of circular tank with coral built up in it, because having been at a coral reef, I had a handful of that available. We dropped the Coral Zombie Nautilus in there. Then I tried to bring a regular Nautilus in, and that was the point at which I really ran into an issue with it suffocating on dry land. I couldn't airlift it from the nearby ocean to this fish tank without installing little ponds on the way and kind of like
Oh my
dipping it
gosh.
in like a tea bag every time I got to like the first like every pond on the way. I had to make sure that it like re-upped its ability to be in water, and so that it didn't suffocate for the next leg of the journey. And I had to do that 3 times before I actually got the timing right and was able to get there fast enough that the Nautilus didn't end up suffocating outside of the water. But eventually we got there, so I now have all 3 of those. The last one to be added was the zombie Nautilus, and that was just as easy as the coral one, even easier because it was available nearby. So I just flew up into the air, despawned all of the cave mobs and stuff, and then came back down slow enough that eventually a trident-wielding drowned spawned riding a zombie Nautilus and was able to get it that way. A few people provided some really useful feedback on that, though, because if you have like a stream of water leading down from a fish tank to somewhere that the Nautilus can swim up from, you can still kind of swim it upstream a little bit because it's rideable. It'll be a little bit easier to travel with it that way than it would be with like trying to get a squid there, for example, where you can't attach leads to it or whatever. The opportunity of like, waterlogging minecart rails was also a possibility, but I couldn't get a Nautilus into a boat at any point during this, so I don't know how easy they would be as like a minecart passenger either. But ultimately, yeah, I have a little fish tank there now, and it's a nice way to spend a bunch of time with the Nautilus when otherwise I probably wouldn't have had much interaction with the mob at all.
So I thought you had it in the boat, and that's how you were dipping it into the
No,
water.
no,
No,
I
just
had
on
it
a
just
lead.
leashed to the underside of a
Oh,
ghast
wow.
and free
Jeez,
dangling
okay.
down there, yeah, like a
Yeah,
pendulum.
yeah. Wow, yeah, that's tricky. I'd be so worried about like not just suffocating in the air, but like suffocating in general, like into a tree or into a mountain or like whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's tricky. I mean, Nautilus in a bucket when, Mojang? Like that's for
Yeah.
people that want to move it around and not have to do what Pixelrus just did. That would be essential. Have you run into any issues with the Nautilus like fighting one another in the tank?
No,
Like
no.
the zombie Nautilus and the Nautilus don't like attack one another?
They cohabit perfectly fine. I was not expecting them to have anything like that because I don't think it had come up when we'd been looking at the snapshots for this. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like it's not like putting fish in a tank and then you come back and there's one fish left and it's eaten all of the others. Like
Yeah.
fortunately, they don't seem interested in fighting when they don't have a rider, and the rider is obviously going to be more focused on attacking players than anything else. But it's a little different to having like an axolotl or a guardian around. Like you don't need to worry about them,
Yeah.
really getting into fights with each other.
It's projects like this that I makes me wish that the visibility through Minecraft water and through glass was better so that you could see
Mm,
more from the outside. Because I
yeah,
know, I'm sure the screenshot is from inside the tank. Like you probably had to lower yourself in to take the
it
screenshot.
is. Yeah.
And I mean, it looks fantastic, but all that work and the only way to see it is to go swimming with them. Like I kind of wish that there was a way to look at it from the side, even if it was something as simple as putting glass next to water makes it feel like you're in the water, and then just having that texture be applied. I'm trying to think about other situations that they've done that in Minecraft. I feel like I'm remembering something, but I could also just be remembering like a texture glitch or something. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's a cool idea, and I like the lighthouse idea too for airships. Like that's a fun, beacon in the fog or beacon in the dark, kind of like landing strips on airports. Where they've got the lights to kind of lead airplanes in. Which I mean, most times these days it's all instrument based, but for visuals, like that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, one of the things I considered doing when I actually get around to building the rest of it and adding an airship docked at the top is to have the airship design be inspired by the sort of spiral shell of the Nautilus as well. Like, there are a few airship
Oh,
designs
cool.
out there. In Dungeons and Dragons, in fact, there are the mind flayers who travel on ships that are called nautiloids, and they sort of go from plane to plane, traveling between all of these different planes of existence with this sort of like snail shell shaped thing. People will be familiar with this if they've seen the opening cutscene of Baldur's Gate 3, is where a lot of people will know them from to begin with. But yeah, there's like from third edition, I think 3.5 and beyond, there's like mention of these creatures traveling in a ship that looks like that. And so you can steampunk it up a little bit, add like kind of Da Vinci ornithopter kind of wings to the side of it, and
Yeah.
do some funky design stuff with it. But I like the idea of maybe having an airship nearby that ties it into the thematic side of the Nautilus. So despite the fact that they're not really like my jam as far as building goes, they definitely give me food for thought when I can build some stuff in other areas.
Very, very cool.
We'll move on to the news this week because we have Java Edition 26.1 Snapshot 3 to talk about. This was released on Tuesday, January 13th. The changes in this one are additional tweaks to the JVM configuration. The tripwire texture is now rendered as alpha cutout instead of transparent. The day count debug entry has been split off from local difficulty. The game rules screen is now accessible in-game through a new world options screen in the pause menu. This now appears in place of the difficulty button. The world options screen contains the difficulty toggle as well as a button for changing game rules, and the game rules screen is available for operators only. It's disabled for everybody else. A search bar has been added to the top of the game rules screen as well, both in-game and in the world creation menu to help you search for the game rules you want to toggle. Technical changes in this snapshot. The datapack version is now 97, which adds new block tags and fluid tags. They've changed the format of the time command to work with world clocks and timelines. World clocks contain an internal time that increases every tick. They can be paused or resumed, and the time of the clock can be changed or queried from the time command. Timelines contain time markers, which trigger events when the world clock reaches a certain value, allowing players to customize that if you get into the nuts and bolts of data packs. The examples given in the changelog include villagers leaving their beds at a custom time or triggering zombie sieges at custom times, but I'm sure those more technical among you can think of other examples of how that could be used. The resource pack version was updated to 78 as well. This includes the tripwire texture being rendered as alpha cutout, as mentioned before. Some notable bug fixes in Snapshot 3. Breezes being aggressive towards every mob has been fixed, along with the enchant with levels and enchant randomly functions being able to crash the game. Copper chests using the Christmas present texture. Wandering traders selling pumpkins instead of kelp for 3 emeralds. And piglins no longer fleeing from greater numbers of hoglins. Those have all been fixed along with a few other bugs, and the full technical details of the snapshot and the bug fixes can be found at the Minecraft.net article. We'll have that linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
I tried looking for this briefly, but I couldn't find an answer. The tripwire texture, does that also apply to string texture? Like if you're using string to stop the growth of vines or stop the growth of something like
I believe
bamboo?
that's the tripwire they're talking about, is like placed string in the world.
Oh, okay. Cool. Good to know. This is just a guess, but because it's such a light snapshot and such a technical snapshot, I'm wondering if there may have been some content that just ended up not being ready. And so they've bumped it to when it is ready, maybe next week or the week before, just because there has been content for the other snapshots. Like even the snapshot before Christmas, it wasn't big, but there was still like a little something in there. And so I'm just kind of wondering if maybe whatever was supposed to be here just got bumped. And what we got was kind of par for the course for like, here's a little new feature. And then here's a bunch of other technical fixes we've also put in the snapshot. I feel like the second half of that is what we got as the entirety of the snapshot this week. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a little bit more content coming next week.
Yeah, there's obviously nothing to follow last week's baby mobs, but it's still early days for this game drops, so we'll see if we end up getting anything this week. And well, at least in the meantime, people seem to be really happy with the changes to baby mobs. Like I've seen a couple more rounds of feedback and critiques of the textures and that kind of thing. But everything seems to be in a good place. Everything seems fairly constructive when people are discussing it. So I think that's a good place for them to be moving forward. Well, we're going to move forward into chunk mail for this week's episode. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. We try to read a couple of emails every week from our listeners. We also have dedicated chunk mail bag episodes every so often, so we get to cover a little bit more listener email in those. If you want your email read on the show, please do keep it short and on point. It really does help us include those in the show more easily. And if you're a patron, even if we don't get to your email in the main show, we can also occasionally cover email in the render distance, the extended version, which patrons will of course be able to hear. So let us know if you're a patron of the show in the subject line, and we can make sure those get included in the show here and there as well. Joel is going to read this first one for us.
First email comes from Harvey L. The subject is name tags and anvils. With the new craftable name tags, do you feel we need to update the anvil? At first, I imagined a cheaper cost to craft anvils, but I was then brought back to something you guys bring up a lot when it comes to mechanics. How is this conveyed to the player? Currently, the anvil can only spawn naturally in a woodland mansion. Do you think it would be better to have a cheaper craft cost or have them spawn naturally in villages? They could be a new job block, but that's not necessary since regular furnaces and crafting tables also spawn in villages and are not job blocks. Harvey died from an anvil falling on his head, which is a very Looney Tunes way to go.
It
That's
really is.
classic. Yeah,
Second only to the piano, I think. Yeah, or the
yeah,
1,000-ton weight. Yeah.
yeah. I can hear the noise. Like I can hear it in my head. I've watched so many of those cartoons as a kid.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the ability to craft anvils cheaper, it's an interesting one because I feel like as far as recipes go, there aren't that many that require full resource blocks. I think the anvil is one of the only ones really that needs it, that isn't transforming the block into something else, like, putting copper into a stone cutter and getting copper grates out of it, for example, right?
Right.
But I feel like as instead of adjusting the recipe of this, I feel like recently Mojang has gone the route of adjusting iron availability rather than adjusting the expense of some of these recipes. Like, you
Right.
think back to iron farms becoming arguably a lot easier to make as of Village and Pillage when they changed the mechanics of how villagers produce iron golems. And then since then, we've had caves and cliffs where I think people have difficulty finding iron in surface caves, and that was like a big thing right after Caves and Cliffs came out, was ore distribution having changed. But you're rewarded for digging deeper. There are huge veins once you find like deep slate layers, and if you stumble into one of those, it's a massive boost of iron when you find one. And then you also have the opportunity to head up mountains to find more surface iron as well. So I feel like while it's an expensive recipe, relatively speaking, I think typically you only need one to begin with, and you're usually finding like a stack or two of iron when you go mining. So the hope, at least, I think, is that you're going to find enough that an anvil doesn't seem too expensive after a decent caving trip.
Yeah, I felt at first that 24 iron to craft an early game mob. Actually, it's more than that. It's 27 plus
Yeah, it's 20,
5.
27 for the blocks, and then
So it's
I think
30,
like 30 something.
31. So I got my math wrong. So it's a little steep at first, but then like if you were to reduce it, what would you change the crafting recipe to? Would it be the same pattern with just iron ingots? Going down to 7 feels like a huge nerf. Like
Yeah.
that's a little bit of a strange way to. It doesn't feel as important if that's the case. I kind of like Harvey's idea of seeing an anvil in a village so that you could just grab one if you happen to be lucky enough. Because not every village is going to have a toolsmith or a weaponsmith in it, and that would
Hmm.
be the place where you would expect an anvil to be as part of the village design or part of that house design that's within that village. So I wouldn't mind seeing something like that. Mojang could also put them as part of loot chests in dungeons or abandoned mine shafts. Maybe trial chambers, but I mean the chances are you have an anvil before you attempt a trial chamber. So like there's probably that kind of give and take there. So I don't know. I thought it was an interesting idea to reduce it, but I think as you said, iron availability is great and probably a better solution than making them cheaper. So I think anvil availability would lean a little bit more towards what Harvey is talking about. And I remember the last time I started over, which was for that snapshot world that I still have. I definitely ran into a lot of iron as I was just crossing a mountain just to kind of get somewhere, just to kind of try to find a place I wanted to set up. And I found iron just walking across the landscape. So like that, I think is a decent way to also get it early game. Um, when it comes to changes to the anvil, and I mean conveying it to the player is pretty straightforward. I think it just pops up as a recipe. As soon as you get iron, or as soon as you smelt iron into an ingot, you'll get a new recipe. And I think that the anvil is one of them. So it's not a giant mystery. It's
Yeah.
also an achievement, I think. I think you have to repair something on an anvil as one of the achievements. I can't really remember.
It might be a
Um,
bedrock achievement. I don't know if it shows up in Java
maybe.
that way, but yeah,
Mm,
either way, like I think the recipe book toast and then it appearing in the recipe book when you look at the crafting stuff is going to
yeah.
be easy enough to signpost most recipes that way now.
And it says repair. Like when you go into the interface on an anvil, I think it says like repair items or something like that on it. Um, what I would like to see changed is the escalating repair and combination XP costs on an
Yeah.
anvil. It's less of a problem when you have mending, but it's a bigger problem in early game and mid game for players that don't have access to mending yet. If you're trying to combine bows together, if you're trying to repair a pickaxe, sometimes, if I recall, it's like almost as much iron to repair or more a pickaxe than it is to just make a new one. And at that point, like, why would you bother? And then like, why do I have an anvil? If it costs more to repair something than it does to just build a new one, I'm just going to build a new one, especially if it's something as rare to find as diamonds. So I would like to see the cost of things be better. And specifically for me in late game, what I run into a lot is books and bows. If you're trying to combine books and bows, sometimes the XP cost just gets astronomical and it feels a
Yeah.
little bit far-fetched. And for anybody, again, trying to do it mid to late game, if you haven't really gotten to an 8-year-old survival world like I have, where resources are really not a problem, then it can be a little bit of a bottleneck and perhaps frustrating because it doesn't really necessarily let you know that it's going to be like once you repair something once or you combine something like a bow once, it doesn't tell you that future costs are going to be problematic. At some point, you're going to have to get rid of this bow. And at that point, it feels like you're being punished for being good at the game, right? Like, I'm so good that I've not lost this item. I've had this bow enough times that this is my 4th time repairing it. And now I just can't. And now I have to start
Yeah.
all over. And so like it feels a little bit of a like a backwards kind of progression there.
Yeah, I agree. The other weird thing that happens for me is if you imagine you've got a stack of name tags, if you want to name all of your mobs one thing, then you can rename that full stack of items for the same XP cost. You're using like 1 XP level to do
Right.
that, right? But if you wanted to name 64 individual name tags so that all of your animals can be called different stuff, that's 64 levels. So I feel like there is still a little bit of a discrepancy when it comes to the utility of that stuff versus the cost of it, because it really shouldn't cost you 64 times as much to give all of your animals individual names if we're going to be going down the route of like the animals are already part of
Yeah.
it. And that kind of ties into our second email really well, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and read this one. This comes in from Sage, whose subject is emotional attachment to villagers. Dear Joel and Pix, with the next drop having emotional attachment to mobs as a design pillar, I've been thinking about a small problem with villagers. In Java Edition, any free roaming villagers tend to slowly but inevitably die over time due to small bits of damage taken from pathfinding off of ledges that are slightly too tall. This stifles my motivation to name any villagers, as they are very likely to eventually disappear. A small parity change could fix this problem. In Bedrock Edition, villagers actually regain health while they sleep, but in Java Edition, for some reason, they don't. Do you feel like a parity fix like this is important, and are there any other small parity issues you would like to see addressed? Sage slowly died from 20 sprained ankles.
No more ankles is something that comes up in my Twitch chat a lot. I tend to just
Yeah.
jump off of builds regardless. The netherite boots help a great deal with my, especially when I was in West Hill, where like I wasn't high enough to really fly off of anything. I was just jumping off of 4 blocks as I was building a house, and just constantly the crunch noise I think was irritating chat. But good news, Sage. Name tags are now cheaper, or will be as soon as the next drop comes out. Which actually, like you said, with name tags being cheaper, that means that there's going to be more naming. Like you can do that a lot easier. You can kind of do it like what's the recipe? Is it's string and a piece of paper, something like
It's like it's
super cheap.
a piece of paper and a single nugget of any metal. So it can be
Right.
copper nugget, iron nugget, like you get 9 of them per ingot. So easy to craft. Yeah.
Very easy to get. So with that, you're going to want to name all the things, right? So to your point about the anvil, like naming things could be cheaper. I'm wondering if we're going to see naming things with name tags be separate from the anvil. Like, do you have to name the name tag on the anvil, or will name tags just have their own interface?
Right click with like a GUI pop up kind of thing, so that you can
something like that.
write on it basically. Yeah,
that could be interesting to see if that changes. I'm not sure how complicated a parity change like villagers gaining health while they sleep would be to implement, but it seems pretty straightforward to me. It's the kind of thing where I'm kind of surprised that isn't already in the game. I don't know why they wouldn't want Java villagers to regain health when they sleep. I think it would be really helpful for new players that aren't aware that villagers are useful. They'll discover one, maybe they'll set up near one, or they'll walk through one where it's being loaded and not realize that at nighttime that there's a risk for those villagers. Granted, they usually have an iron golem around, but like that's not always successful. And so you might end up losing those villagers. So I think that that's a good thing to have, in the early game for players that aren't aware of it. If those villagers can sleep and regain some health, that would be good. I don't know whether they should go from, taking a lot of damage to fully healed, or maybe they gain like 1 or 2 hearts every time they sleep. I'm not sure how that, would balance out. And unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with the intricacies of Bedrock Edition to know what parity changes I would want brought over. And I don't know what would be the simple ones. Like, what would be the low hanging fruit where it's just like, oh, yeah, like that would be an easy one. I'm not a developer nor do I know enough about the two different versions to know if what something in Bedrock that is done that appears simple might be very complicated to do in Java Edition. I just don't know, right? Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with anything on Bedrock that would be, of high demand in Java Edition.
There are a couple of things that spring to mind. The first being pushable tile entities or block entities, like anything with a container being pushable, because that's a thing on Bedrock Edition, and that leads to some way more interesting contraptions if you include that in Java Edition. Think about having a movable storage system or a storage system that can rearrange so that a new empty chest is added when a full one is in the system. You're just using comparators and sticky pistons moving stuff around, for example. Like, you can do wacky stuff like that. And unfortunately, because of Bedrock's redstone not being deterministic based on update order the way Java's is, you end up with contraptions that take advantage of that having to be much larger because the redstone has to be wired a certain way. And so I think the technical community could get a lot out of that. But I think the technical community is also likely to be the ones who are pushing back against it, no pun intended, because the some of the contraptions that they've already built rely upon some tile entities not being pushable. Think about like furnaces blocking slime block flying machines from traveling super far. You have to swap all of that stuff out for blocks that are supposed to be immovable, like, obsidian, for example, stuff like that. So there's a little bit of alteration might work there, and it might break some stuff where it makes other stuff possible. So I feel like it's a bit of a controversial topic, but that's one of the ones that is always in the conversation, because the potential of having movable tile entities would be so interesting, and just like it goes against some of the stuff that Java Edition Redstone players have built for in the last decade or so at this point.
Dan Grice in our live chat is mentioning colored cauldrons would be something that they might want to bring over as well. I forgot about that one.
Yeah. And the potion brewing mechanics being so integral with cauldrons, is another thing from Bedrock Edition that's interesting, but is more of like a sideways move from Java. So kind of curious if that would be a thing. Going back to the idea of villagers regenerating health, though, I do think it would make a lot of sense, considering that there is precedent for it now. We've had a couple of recent mobs added with strong regeneration behaviors. Allays being the main example. They have super fast passive regeneration. Happy Ghasts regenerate in the same way that a lot of other rideable mobs do, but they regenerate faster under specific conditions, like rain or when it's snowing, or if you're flying above a certain height, Ghasts will regenerate the health faster. So I think it's possible now for them to think about, well, maybe villagers can regenerate a little bit as they sleep for the night. That's also something that happens. You and I played Enshrouded sort of recently. That's something that happens when you sleep in Enshrouded, is the player regenerates health faster as well. And so it could be interesting if that's a mechanic that gets added to beds as just a secondary effect of sleeping for the night. You get a small burst of regeneration, but obviously if the night is skipped, then you're just going to pop right out of the bed again, so you might only be able to regenerate a couple of hearts just in the time that you spend there. But taking a healthy nap is something that we advise here at the Spawn Chunks. The other thing is, like, with villagers being a little bit accident prone, and here's the sort of devil's advocate argument for this, I think it becomes another problem for the player to solve, which I recognize can feel a little bit irritating, but it's also gameplay if you take it from another direction, right? This is like, it's like the puzzle solving aspect of Minecraft. Like, it can get a little bit tiresome, and especially if you've curated a villager's trades or you rely heavily on them and that villager ends up dying, it can be frustrating. But then you adapt to that and you try and figure out, okay, where are all of the points that they're falling off, or jumping into a puddle and then drowning, which is typically what villagers end up doing a lot of the time. So you think a little bit more about the design of a space to keep villagers safe. The problem is, does that then encourage creativity because you're trying to solve for that problem, or does it limit creativity because you can't go absolutely wild with the design of this village and make it like a spectacular thing with cliffs everywhere because the villagers are going to act like lemmings and throw themselves off them occasionally? The other problem really for me with natural villages like that is zombie sieges and pillager patrols are still a thing. And pillager patrols don't spawn if the player is within a few chunks of the village, and it usually just counts a village as a village around a point of interest, a bed or a workstation or what have you. But once you leave that radius, it's still possible for patrols to spawn next to where the village is, because it's not doing it based on the location of the village, it's the player's proximity to the village. And so if the patrol spawns a few chunks away from the player, that could very easily be surrounded by villagers that they could just start shooting. The other thing is zombie sieges being related to how many beds there are in an area and how many villagers there are for like the population. A lot of villager trading hall designs are designed to avoid zombie sieges altogether because they just don't provide the villagers with beds, and that means it doesn't register as that kind of village for a zombie siege purposes. But the rest of the time, if you're using a free-flowing kind of free-range villager situation, you're going to find that zombie sieges spawn if you let it get to a certain time of night, and so the player has to sleep after a certain point, which is harder to manage if you're going underground in the area and you don't know what time of day it is and so forth. Natural villages often are going to have to keep a low population in order to avoid a siege, and spawn proofing for sieges is very difficult because they don't follow normal spawning conditions. The zombies can spawn inside of slabs sometimes, and if you're slabbing the ground but there's a solid block underneath that, they will still spawn on that solid block and then just walk out on top of the slabs. So it's difficult. I think it's one of those aspects of the game that is still, again, mechanically it gives the player a problem to solve, but the solutions for it aren't the standard solutions you implement elsewhere. So I think it can be a little bit difficult managing free-range villages, which is why you see so many people building trading halls in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thought process because with Agnes mentioning that the emotional attachment to mobs is kind of like a focus this go around on the snapshot. In most cases, and especially in early game, you have to kill Minecraft mobs for food or their materials, right?
Yeah.
You've got cows for steak and leather, chickens for chicken and feathers, pigs for pork chops. You don't have to, but you can, it's one of the things. Hoglins for pork chops and leather, which is a little bit easier because they're attacking you, like they're a hostile mob. Squids and glow squids for their ink sacs and glow ink, and sheep initially until you figure out or get shears for the wool. Otherwise, you have to, if you don't have anything at the beginning, you kind of have to kill the sheep for a bed, at least a couple of them. So you kind of have to pick your poison. And adult versions of animals in Minecraft aren't necessarily conventionally cute. I know some people find them adorable, but I'm not one of those people. I think awkward or derpy is a little bit more accurate in terms of like from a character design perspective of someone that's worked as an illustrator and like has that kind of knowledge. I don't feel like a lot of the adult animals are overly cute. The younger ones are pretty good. The pig is borderline. But I think in that way, it lends itself to the players harvesting the animals as opposed to keeping them as pets. And I'm wondering what that's going to do. Granted, the changes so far are only for the baby animals, with the exception of the rabbits that got an overhaul. They're not changing the look of the sheep or the cows or the pigs, as far as I can tell, or the adult chickens. So I don't know whether that's going to change player behavior, if that's the mission of the idea behind an emotional attachment to mobs in the game. Villagers are the same way, as you mentioned. Like, villagers tend to be exploited for their trades as are animals. Like, you got farms and chicken cookers, and we built a chicken cooker ages ago on the Citadel, and I made it even more elaborate. I could have made it hidden and something that you don't see happening in the background, and just go to the chest and get the chicken. But I really made a production out of it. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine of cooking chicken. So like, it's funny how Minecraft kind of pulls out the, I don't want to say like, it's a huge stereotype, but like the way that I'd say maybe younger players play the game, which is like, can I kill it? What do I get? Right? Like, it's a very basic approach. You can approach it in another way, obviously sandbox, and usually, especially these days, there's a different way to get something. I think a really good example is the hoglins for leather, right? They drop a pork chop in leather. Do they not?
Yeah. Hoglins, yeah. the two different drops where like yeah, pigs you normally only get pork chops from, and you get leather from cows in the overworld.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and for us on the Citadel, because of that, and because of the long term world and like cows and stuff being farther and farther afield, we have a data pack that allows you to smelt rotten flesh into leather. So it's still a
Right.
cost. You have to
Yeah.
the cost smelt of like wood or coal or whatever, but you end up with all this rotten flesh from killing zombies, and you can't do anything with it. And so we thought that that would be a good solution for the leather issues, because I wanted to use a lot of item frames, and they always require leather. Books as well was an early thing that we wanted
Hmm.
for doing enchanted books and stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like there's now more ways to get some of the things that you're looking at. I mean, like I said, there's passive ways to get things like wool from sheep, but you don't have access to that right away, depending on your knowledge and how much you're paying attention to the crafting book, right? So, or the recipe book. So yeah, I think that I don't know whether having baby mobs in the game will change the way that we feel about adult mobs, nor do I feel like it's going to change the way we feel about villagers. Trading didn't change the way that we feel about villagers. If anything, it made them a little bit more exploitative than
Yeah.
less, right?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. It's curious if you want to maybe take an animal that's like your mascot or something like that. I can see that people
Yeah.
going that way and being like, we have this one named pig who's like patrolling the zone, keeping the peace, that kind of thing. And it encourages you to make the animal into more of a character. But then yeah, like if you're talking about like having a cow pen full of cows, you're not going to name tag all of them individually, watch them grow up from like young cows into full adult cows, and then feel good about being like, well, I need some steaks, so like this lot have to go. I guess it maybe helps people think a little bit more about where food comes from in the real world, and the fact that all
Sure.
of these cows have got to be raised by somebody who's hopefully taking care of them in that sort of way. But yeah, I think it's an interesting choice to have as like the major theme for at least that part of the update. I think it's interesting in the video she says one of the pillars for this update, and so I'm kind of curious if we're going to hear in the next couple of weeks what the other pillars of this update are likely to be as well. For now, though, we're going to move on into talking about Hytale a little bit and what Minecraft can learn from Hytale. The highly anticipated release of this game came on Tuesday, January 13th, and it quickly became the most played game on Twitch for at least a couple of days. We have both dipped into Hytale this week. Joel, I think you've played a little bit more than I have, but I managed to get like 4 or 5 hours in on stream and played a little bit off camera as well. So I thought we could talk about what we've learned and what both games could learn from their blocky neighbors.
I mean, I spent a lot of time in Hytale. As I mentioned in the login, I played on Tuesday in Minecraft, and I have not logged back into Minecraft until today to take screenshots for the show. I just streamed every day in Hytale. It seemed like it was both a good streaming decision because it's a pretty popular game right now, and also I got hooked into it. Like, not in an unhealthy way, but like in a very fun, very engaging way with an early access game that has a lot going on. And so my experience, weirdly, I did not really build very much. Most of my
Mm,
experience was focused on exploration, traversal, and the tech tree, and kind of like getting gear and getting geared up, which is what I was actually concerned about going into this. Because a lot of RPGs, the idea is like, you go in and you're going to build some armor and you get a sword and figure out what weapon you like and your abilities, and you want to progress. And for this, because the armor has not only just a function, but also like it changes the way that you look, even though it is first person. And because of the nature of the models, I wasn't really overly excited about how it was going to make my blocky character look. It turns out that the character looks pretty good. The armor changes from tier to tier. It's not as customizable as one might want it to be yet, um, because I mean, for anybody listening, I mean, put a big asterisk on this conversation. It's early access, and there are things changing like every other day.
yeah.
There's been 2 hot fixes and an update drop since it released a week ago. So there are things that are changing quite frequently. But as of like this weekend, um, I think I had like a cobalt sword or some thorium armor, some thorium upgrades. So like I was into like the mid tier, and
Hmm.
for me, that was the focus. I did a little bit of building. I watched some of your stream, and you ended up kind of like in the middle of a plains area where there was nothing around. I found like an abandoned mine shaft with a tower home built right above it. So I just commandeered it. There was no one inside. It was just like this old ruin. It had holes in the walls and stuff I had to patch up quickly. But over time, I threw in a little bit of wood here and there. I replaced the windows and expanded the floor a little bit, but it allowed me to get going really quickly as like a place to sleep, a place to have all my stuff. And I didn't have to really build too much. So I was able to just focus on like coming back, figuring out what my next, mission would be as far as progression goes, and then adventuring out into the world. And that was kind of like my rinse and repeat every stream, because without mounts or flying, like you're walking everywhere, which is great. It's a great way to experience the world, but it does take some time. It's a pretty large world, and depending on what biome you want to get to, it can be pretty far afield, which could also be bad luck depending on, I've heard people say like they didn't have a desert for 4 in-game days worth of walking. I was like, oh gosh, like that's really far away. And we've had some experiences like that in Minecraft. Like I think if you're looking for something like a cherry grove or something more specific like an ocean monument or a woodland mansion, like you could be in for a really long trek depending on the luck of your seed. But so far, like I've really been enjoying it. First impressions are just like travel the world, look around. If you're going to try Hytale, I think it's a great time to try it. It's, it is early access, but it's pretty polished. And I didn't experience any technical problems. I didn't have any crashes. I didn't have any hiccups like that. I know other players have, but for me, it was pretty smooth sailing.
Nice. Yeah, I think it was more or less that way for me as well. I haven't noticed any major game-breaking bugs. I'm still working on the vanilla version of the game. Like I haven't really experimented with mods, and I know that's where the game becomes a little bit more unstable. But yeah, I played for close to 5 hours on Thursday. I did a little bit more time between streams. I'm probably not going to stream any more of it as far as I know, but maybe I'll dip back into it here and there as the game updates. For what I did, I only spent time in Explorer mode. There is a grayed out adventure mode that just isn't going to be in the early access release yet. And I haven't done anything in creative. I don't know if you've dabbled with creative mode at all.
I have not, but I was watching Gemini Tay's stream, and she was really enthralled with the game. And during one of her little breaks, I think, to go grab a cup of tea, she also switched over and checked out creative mode. And there is a lot built in already. There was like I don't know if it had a replay, but it had something similar to replay mod. There's definitely a lot of like world building brushes, and think about it. It reminded me of that cozy builder that you talked about. Some Everglade. What was the name of it on Steam?
Tiny Glade.
Tiny Glade. Yeah. Very similar to Tiny Glade in terms of the kind of stuff that you can do, where like you just choose ruin brush and start painting, and it just starts painting ruins built into the landscape. Right. And then you can obviously go in there and tweak them block by block if you want, but it gives you like 4 walls and a roof immediately, and then starts randomly putting in like broken pillars and things like that. So there are things to kind of get you going from a creative standpoint pretty quickly. There was brush that painted texture. You could remove blocks. You could just replace the texture of blocks. So think like painting a stone path down a plains biome without changing the topography. You're just changing what blocks are stone and which blocks are grass. I thought that was really neat. Some of them even had a little bit of stippling built in, so it wasn't like a hard edge brush. You'd have like little holes in the path where a grass block might show up. So there was a lot of stuff like that. I would encourage you to go check out Gemini Tay's VODs on YouTube, because she has the creative kind of showcase in there that she was messing around with. And she didn't really do anything. She didn't build anything in creative. She was just kind of messing around to see what was there. And I mean, she's more familiar with those kind of creative tools and mods in Minecraft than I am, and she seemed pretty impressed. So there's lots of stuff out there for people that are like, maybe you're not an adventurer, maybe you're a builder, maybe you are a creative player, and you're just looking for something as a creative outlet that has different tools and different textures and different buildables. And like I think Hytale's got a little something for everybody right now.
Yeah, commands aside, it sounds like their creative mode is a lot more like a level editor than Minecraft's is, because Minecraft is still kind of the one block at a time kind of approach, like I said, commands notwithstanding. Whereas, yeah, if it feels like it's got more kind of brushes and tools for stuff like that, then yeah, it feels a little bit more kind of like a classic level editor. But, in the Explorer mode, I took a pretty Minecraft-like approach. Like you said, I found a spot for a base. I was actually looking around for a structure to take over like yours, and didn't end up finding one that wasn't already populated by enemies. And I didn't feel like confident enough to take them on with like the basic starter sword and everything. So I started mining some stone. I constructed about half a fort, and then I went looking for upgrades. I had 4 walls around me. I was like, we're fine here. I built a door, and then I left. So I've explored a fair bit of the surface world on stream, including the desert biomes. Fortunately, I didn't have to go too far for them. I looked for some of the structures. I did some careful tiptoeing around one of those volcanic islands that's in the middle of the ocean. And then since then, I've played, probably another 3 or 4 hours searching for the other materials. I'm probably about the level you are in terms of having thorium and cobalt stuff now. On the volcanic islands, I found a lot of adamantium, but you have to upgrade your workstations before you can even craft anything with it, so I haven't got that far yet because you need to amass a lot of materials, and it was more about, at this point, finding out where that stuff was, because I didn't really look up anything about where to find any of it, so it was kind of curious where I needed to get, like, shadow weave fabric from, or whatever, that kind of thing. So this world feels, I think, especially as a first impression, but the more I explore it, more firmly grounded in fantasy than even Minecraft does, right? Like, I think Minecraft can be a little bit more vague, and you can get away with building in a greater variety of styles with the block palette, like your sci-fi stuff. I don't know if you could necessarily go in with the same level of sci-fi if you were looking at something like Hytale. It feels very fantasy coded, and that's the baseline aesthetic for the world. I think in order to get anything more out of it from a genre perspective, you're probably looking at either some very strong suspension of disbelief or modding stuff in with new textures and everything like that. Would you agree with that?
Yes, as far as the sci-fi versus fantasy, for sure. Or like modern city, current day cars and trucks and planes and automobiles, like that kind of thing. Yeah, like you're definitely building in a fantasy RPG. One thing that is nice about it, though, is that it's rich in terms of the diversity of the biomes, and that includes magical stuff. Like, that includes things that are not just like an autumnal forest and white snowy tundra. There's like azure forests, sort of blue and glow at night, and there's like you said, the fiery lava islands that are, I think they're called the burnt forests. And the woods and different materials that you can collect from these places do craft into various different styles of building. At first, it just looks like hardwood, wood, softwood, and lightwood, which are just various versions of, oak and birch and all that kind of stuff that you might find in Minecraft. But, when you get something like deadwood or burnt wood, it crafts into something that looks like a Halloween build. Some of the dark stone or volcanic stone looks like something out of a cursed tomb. So if you wanted to build like a vampire castle, there are 100% textures in this game that lean very dark and very spooky, especially when you're talking about things like custom pieces that are like railings or little stairs or little chests. Like, you can get a chest that has like a skull on it as a closing mechanism. So like, it really fits thematically if you want to go spooky, or if you're going to be a wizard or a warlock or something from an RP perspective. I didn't get there, but it looks like there's a lot of magic in the game. And so even things like the staffs and weapons tend to look like they have ethereal elements. They definitely leaned into earth, air, fire, water stuff, as well as life essence. So and void essence. So like, there seems to be essences of things that you can then use later on that you get from enemies. Like, fighting skeletons in the ice areas gets you ice essence. And then you can use that to craft different things later on. So there's definitely a variety within the fantasy, but you're definitely in like a fantasy Lord of the Rings type of RPG, which is fine. Like, I think that's because Minecraft is very much like that. I mean, you do have the ability to branch off into sci-fi in Minecraft, but that's recent in terms of Minecraft's overall, 15 to 16 year development. And in a lot of cases in Minecraft, going sci-fi really limits your build palette, and there's a stretch of the imagination that happens much more so than if you're building a log cabin or a castle, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I would describe Hytale as fantasy and Minecraft as low tech. I feel like that's the kind of the terminology I've heard applied to Minecraft in the past, where even when you get a beacon or a conduit or something like that, it feels more mystical, even though what it provides you is a sort of a technological boost, because it's giving you haste or whatever and allowing you to physically mine more than you could before. It feels like it comes from a more nebulous kind of magical idea, but it doesn't have like as solid a foundation of that, because you're supposed to sort of graft whatever imagination you have onto it, which I think is one of the key differences between Hytale and Minecraft from what I have played, is that Hytale feels very much like it has its own ideas of what the world is. There is lore text describing, some of the
Hmm.
fantasy races that you'll find as you explore the world, the little kind of NPC villages, and some of the more kind of aggressive factions that you find out there. And it's got more of an idea of this is, an echo of this world called Orbis, and whether that just means that, it's your version of the world, just to separate out all of the individual player experiences and remind you that every world is going to be slightly different, or whether that's something about like the original world has been somehow broken up and has been lost, and now this is just kind of like a fleeting memory of it or something like that. There's still this element of mystery to it, and you can still bring your own imagination into play here, as a lot of players I'm sure will, but it seems to at least have more lore that is surface level and available to the player than Minecraft does, where we aren't told why the world exists, how some of this stuff came to be, and a lot of it is done through environmental storytelling and guesswork on the part of the player.
And the environmental storytelling is really well done. When you go into a biome, because of the diversity of it, because of the way that they have trees and rocks and the landscape changes, you really kind of get a geological history. Like you can go, oh, okay, this is like, there's a lot of rocky outcrops. This is obviously something that, some bedrock is exposed, or just it feels like it's got a world that has some history to it. And there's a map in the game, and you can very clearly see the difference in the biomes from the top down, because like the autumnal area is orange, and azure forests are blue, plains are bright green. They're very easy to spot. However, when you're walking around, those transitions don't always feel super harsh.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just as simple as like walking from outside in a plane to being in tree cover, and it's a very simple transition. We've done it as humans probably more times than we can count, but it doesn't really phase you in the game. And then you look around and go, oh, wow, it feels really different in here, because like the grass is a different color. The lighting is very different. That's the other thing, is that because there's dynamic lighting in the game, when you walk under trees, you walk into shadow. And so you really feel that difference, which is cool. Same thing with you're in the shadow of a mountain, or if you're walking in some places, there's these really steep cliffs and rock outcrops, and you can find like a path in between them and kind of walk along them, kind of like the adventure that Frodo and Mary go on. No, Frodo and Sam right after the Fellowship. What's the name of the area where it's all the razor sharp rocks? Mir, is that it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's right after they kind of split off from the rest of the Fellowship, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah, where the second movie picks up, if people are more familiar with the films. Yeah.
So you can't see where you're going for these spiky rocks, but there is like a ground path in between them. It's very, very sheer cliffs and walls. And that's basically what some of these places are like. And so you just get the impression that they've been around a long time, like they feel old. But walking from one of those into a forest doesn't feel out of place, because they tend to overlap. Like there'll still be a tree growing out near one of those cliffs, or there'd be a little cliff somewhere in the forest. So it kind of feels like the cliffs duck under the forest and stuff. It's very well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also neat that because it's a game that encourages exploration, unlike Minecraft, which I think still has this in some areas, but it's more noticeable, I think, in Hytale, the biomes are small enough that there's always a slightly different biome on the horizon of wherever you are at the time. So you can always see where the biome changes and there's a new place for you to go to. And you might get more subtle transitions like that in Minecraft. Like there might be birch forest as far as the eye can see, and then the birch gets added in with the mix that you get for dark oak forests, where there's dark oak trees, but then there's still like, oak and birch in there as well. Whereas I think in Hytale, you can be in a plains biome, and if you look around, you see, hey, there's a more autumnal thing over there that's its own biome. There's the blue forests over there, which are their own biome. And then in the distance, you might get a look at like the silhouette of some mountains or something like that. And I think having the landscape around you that visibly different, depending on the render distance you're capable of and so forth, like that still allows for players to be encouraged to just continue looking at the horizon and go and find whatever's next as they look for whatever it is they're looking for. Because I find that it's difficult going from a game like Minecraft, where I know so much about it and I know exactly where I'm going to find resources, to doing that sort of early game exploration thing where I have no idea where I'm going to find the cobalt or the thorium or whatever, and really just having to puzzle that out on my own by exploring the surface. It doesn't feel like it emphasizes caving as much as Minecraft does for resource gathering so far. And while there are, like, iron and copper deposits in caves in some of these biomes, I've found a lot of my resources on the surface. What you find when you dig down instead is more of the environmental stuff that they're trying to do with surface biomes as well. And I've seen some players have dug down and found, cave systems with, like, enormous sort of spider dens in them and underground jungles. And there are some cases, I think, now in the most recent patch where you find a world sort of underneath the world in a kind of journey to the center of the earth sort of way, and there are dinosaurs down there and stuff. And that's the kind of stuff where I think when Minecraft announced Caves and Cliffs update and there being new underground biomes, people thought that was an underground world that was, so ripe for, continued development and additional biomes being added, that some people got a little disappointed when all we had was, lush caves, dripstone caves, and then eventually the deep dark. And so I think that might be, again, one of the small lessons that Minecraft can take from Hytale, is that the diversity of underground environments can be so much greater, and it can just end up being like a stronger variety of stuff, drawing people down into an experience that feels like surface adventure, but in the cave layers of the world.
Oh, that's something that I absolutely pulled from it. I think my first 2 or 3 streams, because of the amount of copper and iron that I needed to upgrade stuff, like I was just caving and adventuring. I would want to go and look at other biomes, and then I would find like a hole that looked interesting to go down in because it had some shiny, green light in it. Or I found an abandoned mine shaft. It's like, well, I know that's going to be full of resources, and it just becomes a whole adventure to go down there, because not only are you fighting mobs, because the abandoned mine shafts, you'd find skeletons and other things kind of coming out to get you, but you'd also have to deal with rats. The deeper you go, you end up running into goblins. I found an entire goblin city. I don't remember how deep I was. I wasn't looking at any kind of like stats screen to tell me, but it was akin to, it was a different color. It was all green and blue, but it reminded me of the Goblin City in The Hobbit in the film when they go underground.
Yeah,
It's just all these kind of weird hobbled together things on top of like cave spikes, and there's stalagmites and stalactites everywhere. And there was goblins at every door, and some of them had bows and some of them had bashers. And like, it was, every time I looked around a corner, I had to deal with a couple of goblins. It was fantastic. Like, it was really cool. I had no idea it was there. I walked through a tiny hole and the whole game just opened up and was like, oh my gosh, like, we're going to be here a minute, chat. And then you're trying to figure out, okay, I've just spent half an hour discovering a bunch of stuff. My inventory is 90% full, and now I've just discovered this entire thing. I have to then like figure out what I could leave behind, and am I going to find anything new? And it was really, really cool to see that kind of stuff underground. And I think that's something that I don't experience when I'm doing caving in Minecraft, as I was lighting up the caves under the Mushroom Island. Granted, they're lush caves, so they are pretty to look at, but like, it was just the same thing time and time again, going around the corner, more hanging vines, more puddles, more zombies and things spawning as I lit things up, and that was it. Like, there really wasn't much to run into. I did run into a trial chamber, and I did run into a couple of Minecraft dungeons, but like, at this stage in the game for me, 8 years in, a Minecraft dungeon is just kind of like, well, I don't even really need it. Like, I mean, you've had that experience with your big copper dig. You run into a couple of zombie spawners, like, do I want to keep them? Do I not? Like, first time I played Minecraft, if I found one of those, it was like, this is amazing. What can I do with this? And now it's a box. And the thing that I find so interesting about Hytale in the caving is that there always seemed to be something. I don't remember going on for too long, more than once or twice, where it was just a cave and there were a couple of dead ends. It always seemed to go deeper. Never did I have to stop and say, well, let's dig. Let's make a staircase mine. I'd never had to do that. It was always just like, that seems like a waste of time. Just find a cave and start following and see how far you can get. And you will 100% get to the depth that you want to get to eventually. And sometimes, I got as far as what looked like a nether landscape. Like, there was lava pools, there was fire monsters, floating skulls. There was a giant toad monster that was all lava and elemental. Like, it's some really, really interesting stuff. And all you really had to do was kind of like delve greedily and delve deep, as they say, and see what fate brings you. But it was a lot of fun to kind of go in there and lose yourself in a new game that feels familiar, but then also just has something new around every corner. It was really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the key lessons that I'm sort of breaking this down into a few things for
Yeah.
Minecraft to think about. It really is that players long for this kind of adventure, and most of the praise I have seen of Hytale has really been for the sense of discovery and this sort of inherent adventure of finding these sort of mysterious structures and surprising creatures and the biomes and whatnot. And I feel like realistically, a lot of that can be attributed to Hytale being so new. And it will be really interesting to see, one, if it feels the same after repeat playthroughs, if people decide to like restart their worlds or join servers and sort of they're making the same progress again. At what point does it start to feel like, oh yeah, I've seen this before, like this is the same element but just in a different place, and the same structures overlapping with maybe different biomes and zones, and you just kind of get used to that. And I wonder how long they can sustain that through the game's development in early access to the point where they've added enough stuff that players have this sort of feeling of infinite variety, even if the variety is from a fixed list of things. Obviously, Minecraft has been played for 16 years at this point, so people are fairly familiar with what you can find, but your first time playing Minecraft still feels like that same voyage of discovery. So I'm really curious to see what Hytale can do to sustain that feeling. But I think the interesting thing is that the surface and underground both have like this abundance of structures. It's way more frequent than you find them in Minecraft. Like, you're standing by one of them and you can see one or two others, even if it's just, a small ruin. The first thing I really gravitated to when I chose the spot for my base was something that looked like this sort of old gateway that really just ended up being like an L-shaped piece of ruin out there. But it felt interesting to go up and see what it was, at least, and see if it was something I could turn into a home, or whether I was just going to build nearby. It feels a little bit scattershot at times, and it feels like there's a decent amount of variety, and it's the kind of quirk at this point that is charming instead of irritating, where I feel like Minecraft structures are so dependent on biomes, and a lot of them are fairly cookie cutter. You think about desert temples, so often you're just finding the same structure over and over again without much variation in it. The variation comes from the equipment that you get from it rather than the internal design of anything, or even the external design in the case of desert temples. And recently, Minecraft has had a few more modular structures. You think about the way trial chambers or ancient cities generate. They're the same pieces, but in different formations, and sometimes there are pieces that can be substituted out for others. So I think they are learning. Desert temples are very old, and obviously newer structures have more of that jigsaw kind of approach to them. But I'm kind of curious if there's anything they can do to encourage the player to continue like looking for that horizon and trying to find like more structures, just kind of hopping from structure to structure in future updates, populating the world with more interesting stuff. Even the fact that trail ruins are largely buried and are there for the player to dig out as an archaeological experience feels like a massive structure that you're not really going to find unless you stumble upon it. And so many of those ideas for Minecraft come from expecting players to spend a long time searching the world for this stuff, or to be exploring enough naturally that they come across this stuff as they travel. It turns out exploration in Hytale is a little different to Minecraft as well, in that you have a lot more ability to climb. Not only do you by default have like a step assist that lets you run up single block slopes a lot easier, but you also have the ability to like mantle up in areas. Like you can jump 2 blocks, and then from 3 and even 4 blocks you can sort of haul yourself up over the top of them. And I think that makes climbing hills a lot easier in the early stages when you're not mounted on anything. The horses are a little bit skittish. You can ride them for a little bit, but then as soon as you interact with anything else, you get kicked off, and then they kick you in the head and they run away. So I found that an experience I didn't want to repeat soon, so I decided to just run around myself. And you can get up a lot of even the cliffs on those really tall volcanic islands. You're probably expected to staircase your way up there a little bit. I break a couple of blocks and then I haul myself up to the next, ledge and keep going that way. And even though they look intimidatingly tall, it's not that difficult to get around. And you don't think about exploring that way in Minecraft. I don't bring jump boost potions with me every time I want to go explore a new area where there's cliffs and stuff. Like, more often than not, I'm staircasing up with blocks, or I'm climbing it a certain way, or I'm using a water bucket as a grappling hook, which, while it's effective, doesn't feel like the most logical, or it feels a little bit janky doing that every time, and has the tendency to flood things below you. But I just think it's interesting, the difference in the exploration style that arises from Hytale, having that sense of adventure and empowering the player to go seeking out those experiences.
I think that the movement is huge in Hytale, and that's definitely something I think Minecraft could learn from. I found, and this could just be anecdotal, I don't know whether the blocks in Hytale are 1 meter cubed, but I felt like I was just running faster. Like I don't know whether that's just you are running faster. Maybe the blocks are smaller, so you're covering more ground quicker at the same speed. But either way, I really felt like I was moving faster. The jumping and mantling, as you mentioned, when you were able to grab the ledge of a 3 block or 4 block high thing and pull yourself up, was key to me getting back to grave sites where I died and recovering my stuff. Was key
Yeah.
to just not taking your momentum of like, I'm really enjoying running through this biome, and bringing it to a grinding halt when you come into a cliff. And just, it really feels slow in Minecraft to have to get up something that vertical, or you're just at a certain point in Minecraft, you just leave a pillar of cobble or something behind, and like no one ever goes back to take those out, so they're just stuck there. And
Yeah.
in this, you can really minimally take out 1 or 2 blocks of a probably a dozen or 14 high block cliff in Hytale, and just mantle the rest. Like, as long as you can do it. I even did a little bit of parkour where it's like, I wonder if I can find a way up here without breaking or placing any blocks. And sure enough, like you can jump from 1 block to the next and up as well. And if it's 3 blocks high, you can still grab that ledge and pull yourself up. So it's really, really fun. And it doesn't really feel like it slows you down. One thing that does slow you down is that automatic 1 block step up. That feels
Mm.
slow for some reason. You kind of like slide up it. And it
Compared to
wasn't
like
my,
jumping those, yeah, it does feel a
yeah,
little slow to me.
it wasn't my favorite, so I turned it off. It's just an option that you can just turn off, just like in Minecraft. You can just kind of turn it off. And I'm just so used to hopping up single blocks with the space bar in Minecraft. I thought that was easy enough. But I found that really unlocked the mobility, because rather than every other time getting cut up in a block and it's slowing you down, you would just hop up it, manually. And I felt that was pretty good. I do forget that you can long press the space bar and get a 2 block high jump. I'm so used to Minecraft, I was only just tapping, and I
Yeah.
completely forgot that you can do that. That includes pillaring. So like if you jump up to hard 2 blocks, you can place 2 blocks at a time if you want to go up. So again, it's twice as fast. And I think climbing in Hytale might be 3 times as fast as it is in Minecraft. So there's a lot of mobility there that I thought was really, really good. There are other things too. They lean a little bit more towards combat, but you can do things like slide from a sprint. There are roll commands in the menu, but I was not able to execute one. I think that would be excellent for combat, because I'm not a PvE guy in Minecraft, and I found that combat, one, it was necessary in Hytale, like you really needed to do it and get
Yeah.
drops from mobs to move on. But I found it fun. You can block. The blocking is dynamic. You have to face the guy that's attacking you. If there's more than one guy, they flank you, and so you kind of have to keep your head on a swivel and keep them in front of you. Being attacked by 2 or 3 wolves is an experience, let me tell you, because they get
Yeah, yeah.
behind you. Like, they really do get behind you, and you're like, oh my god, you think like, I've got iron armor, I've been playing this game for a week, I know what I'm doing. Nope. 2 wolves killed me, no problem. I was a little bit sure of myself just then. I should maybe be a little bit more cautious. So that kind of stuff is really, really cool. I discovered midway through the week that you can actually do a shield bash even with 2-handed weapons. So while you're blocking, if you press attack, you can do a pushback on the enemy and push them farther away from you. So if you're feeling like they're attacking you a lot, you can push them back. There wasn't a stun as far as I could tell, at least no animated feedback or indication that I did that, but it did push them back. And it works with a 2-handed weapon as well. You just hit them with the butt of it. So it would be like the pommel of a sword, which does work with single-handed weapons, but with like a big battle axe, you just use the bottom of it, just like smack them in the face with it. And
Hmm.
that's great, because those bigger weapons take longer to swing. So if you need a chance to wind up, you can kind of do that. And I really felt like that combat was dynamic. I always had to keep moving. I felt that landing hits was more satisfying because they would also block. So if I blocked and then they blocked, you'd be in this kind of standstill until somebody screws up. So you can't just key smash. You really have to kind of keep your wits about you and have a strategy to it, which I thought was really good. I think I mentioned the whole blocking and moving thing. I would love to have a roll. I didn't really have any issues dodging out of the way of the magic bolts that some skeletons were throwing at me. I think I got hit by a couple of arrows. It wasn't the end of the world, but even those seem to be a little bit slow, so you can kind of easily just like walk left or right and kind of get out of the way. But if those were ever faster or more frequent, I would want like a dodge roll, and I would
Yeah.
love a way to close that gap. So a backward roll to escape something or a forward roll to kind of get inside on an archer would be really, really cool. I've played other games that have that, and I thought they were pretty useful. But I don't engage in combat in Minecraft, mostly because I'm a builder and it's not my focus. But at the same time, when I have, it's not overly engaging. Something as simple as smacking a zombie with a sword in Minecraft and they flash red. When you compare that to the animations of a skeleton moving with arms and legs and knees and dodging and moving around you, and the satisfying crumple when they die. They don't just disappear, like they crumple into a pile of bones and make a big flop on the ground, and you feel like I won, yes, and then they disappear. And it's simple stuff like that that makes the combat in Hytale, in my opinion, a lot more engaging and a lot more fun.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, where did you land on weapons? Like, did you just go sword and shield the whole
Oh,
time? Did you try out much of the other stuff?
Sword and shield was my bread and butter. I did end up picking up some weapons. So unfortunately at this point, there's not a lot of tooltips in the game. They did improve some tooltips on the builder materials like woods and stuff in the last
Yeah.
update. But right now it doesn't really tell you what the damage is on a sword or or an
And
axe.
I'll tell you why. Flat damage. Like the differences in swords, all it upgrades right now is durability. I don't think the swords individually do any more damage. I think you do like the same amount with a copper sword as you would with an iron sword or a crude one.
I feel like that's different, but I could have also just gotten better at it. I know the crude sword took a lot longer. I really feel like I was able to get more done with other weapons. And when I found a weapon, the axes that the skeletons have and use against you, sometimes they drop them. And
Yeah.
that took, like, I was using a sword and it was 3 or 4 hits to kill a skeleton, and it was 2 hits with this axe, and
Mm.
it was a single-handed axe, and that's not something you can craft. So I was like, okay, that's different. I do find, and this was something either someone told me in chat or I just kind of noticed it, that skeletons would take more damage from blunt weapons, but spiders would take more damage from swords. So, which
Yeah.
makes sense. Like a sword on a skeleton, like that really wouldn't do a whole lot because there's no flesh for it to be an attack. So, using a mace on a skeleton was way more effective. 2 hits, done, right?
Yeah.
The problem is skeletons are kind of fast, so you kind of have to you have to hit them that twice, but you're not going to necessarily do it as quickly as you would just like hitting them 4 times with a sword. So sword and shield was my bread and butter. I tried the daggers, but I'm not quite good enough at first person PvE to kind of utilize them to my best ability. I did like the bigger bashers. I found one, I don't remember what it was called, some sort of mauler, and it really looked like a tree log with rivets on it, like iron rivets
Mm-hmm.
on it.
Yeah.
And it was fun, and it made a really satisfying swoosh when you swung it, like it was deep, and it smashed the crap out of stuff. But it was really, really slow. I found that that was more effective on a slower enemy. So if they had a lot of health, I could use that. Those also hit more than one enemy at a time. So if I was fighting a couple of guys, I could probably use that and get all of their health down by half quite quickly. So that was pretty good. I feel like the iron sword was better than the copper sword, but I don't remember anecdotally. Like I didn't really see the numbers, and I was hoping that the little crash test dummy that you can build would do that. Like I kind of wanted, oh, they
Yeah.
had something like that in Minecraft Dungeons in your little staging area. You could like change
Yeah.
your loadout, go out to the dummy, and it would show the damage that you were doing. I would love something like that in Hytale where you could walk up to that and hit it with a sword and say, oh, that did -6. And then an iron sword, like, oh, that did -8. Like, okay, so that's better. Or just give me the stats on the weapon. Right now they all have what's it called, signature energy, and there's no
Yeah.
explanation as to what that is. You'd have to be reading the blogs and all that to know. And I went into this blind. I read a little bit of what they have on the website, but I really didn't go into the blog articles yet. I will do this week. I wanted to kind of have a clean slate and kind of experience it as if I was, green first time in the game. And so it did take a little bit of time to figure out, but the combat for me was really, really fun.
Yeah, I found the variety of combat is as simple as just giving each weapon a couple of different attacks. Like you've got a couple of different swings, and then you've got the
Yes.
Q move that you have to charge up by
Yep.
killing enemies, and then you can use that. And so that was kind of fun. I
Hmm.
mostly did sword and shield like you, and then after taking out one of those Outlander outposts where they're like in the snowy biome, and it's where you get the stuff that you need to craft thorium stuff or cobalt stuff.
Cobalt. Yep.
I ended up finding some daggers there and used those a little bit, and the charge attack with those just being able to like leap forward and stab something and do a ton of damage, and then it like launches you
Yes.
back. I found that way more effective at attacking those guys because they're really brutal if you're just standing and trading blows. So yeah, like there's a little bit more variety in the combat, and I think that's a good thing. It's as simple as giving an enemy a couple of different attacks they can do, and you not knowing which one of those is coming next, I think makes combat really exciting compared to a lot of Minecraft mobs that will really just like walk towards you and hit you with the same attack over and over again. It's really contact with the mob that does melee damage rather than them swinging to hit you, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And the same goes for projectile enemies. All they're ever going to do is fire an arrow at you, and they don't do that in any particular variety of ways. So it's really just about like timing when it comes to Minecraft stuff. And so with this, it's a bit more dynamic. You can be a bit more responsive to what the enemies are doing. And so that's another a fun thing that maybe Minecraft could keep in mind. Even the fact that the Warden has two different attacks, right? It can melee you up close to do a ton of damage, but it can also hit you from range. That alone makes the Warden a much more dynamic opponent than your average zombie or skeleton or even Enderman, you know? Like, the Enderman teleporting is their major thing, but they're always just going to walk up to you and smack you upside the head, you know? So I do think there's a bit to be said for there being more variety in the ways enemies could attack you in games like this. My other real note for Minecraft to think about really is the impression that some of the stuff in Hytale gives as a curated spectacle. And I'm really talking about the first visit to the Forgotten Shrine that you go to that's sort of close to World Spawn. I actually parked myself a lot further away from that, and so I realized that I should go back there after maybe 3 hours of gameplay. And it's a shame. I kind of wish I'd gone there sooner because it unlocks a mechanic that is kind of crucial to you, like learning more about the world as you explore. But the first time you go there, you step through this portal and it teleports you to this grand temple on like a sky island. And that creates a really solid first impression. It's like, it reminds me of the server spawn hubs that you see on multiplayer minigame servers like Hypixel. But I think it's one of those situations where you can guarantee the player having a certain type of experience because that hub is a pre-built, curated space. It's not procedurally generated. Everyone gets the same thing. But you can't always guide the player in a fully procedurally generated world. However, there is precedent for it in Minecraft. Like, I think the end is a really good example of this, where obviously the landscape is kind of basic and the shape of the landmass is different, but the Dragon Fight Arena has this kind of monolithic feel to it. It feels intimidating in that sense of there are these giant pillars everywhere and there's the spectacle of the dragon, making its home there. The dragon itself is kind of scary. Like, people love and dread the dragon fight in Minecraft. And so I feel like there is something to the notion of being able to step through a portal or, step into an unknown place and there being something that is handcrafted there waiting for you. And I think that could be an opportunity for, if they add future dimensions to Minecraft, if they add something through the ancient city portal, maybe, you come out into something that is already going to wow you with a sense of spectacle. And if that's guaranteed, instead of like the first time you spawn into the nether and it generates you like in a box in the terrain somewhere where you don't get this sort of grand vista of lava lakes and nether fortresses and the columns of lava coming down from the ceiling, instead you just get the inside of a netherrack block because the terrain didn't generate the right way, and it feels a little bit underwhelming. Whereas, if you have curated spectacle, I really feel like it can have a big impact on players, and that's when you get players just like falling in love with an environment like that. Where I think Hytale's Forgotten Temple feels very much like, oh, okay, this is a home feeling place. Like, you go there, it's full of animals, like there's a few NPCs there, nothing is attacking you, and there's this sort of very peaceful aura and atmosphere to everything that, again, feels like a really nice experience to have after you've run around the world a little bit and realize some of the stuff attacks you and you're trying to figure out how to survive in this world. It's nice to come to a place that feels protective after all of that.
And I didn't go there first either. I saw it on the map. It was the only thing on the map and the compass that was kind of preloaded. And to me, with my previous experience with RPGs and MMOs, I thought it might have been a dungeon. I thought, okay, cool. They've included a entry-level dungeon in the early access build. I am probably not geared to go through the portal to the Forgotten Temple. Like it sounds like Forgotten Temple sounds like there's going to be skeletons and mummies in it, right? Like it doesn't sound friendly. So I didn't go there at first. I mean, thankfully I was able to handle the golem out front. It's weird that there's a golem out front that you have to fight in order to go into the friendly place, but that's a sorry side fact. But yeah, I really enjoyed it there too. I hadn't explored very far afield, so I had not run into any Quebecs in my adventures. So that was the first time I saw the Quebecs as well.
Yeah,
as well as the Clops. You ran into one almost immediately underground.
Yeah, he was just like, he was living in a little house. I felt really bad.
Yeah.
I walked in there and started mining all of his like little stacks of iron ingots, and he seemed fine about that. And then I opened a chest, and he was like, "Hey!" and he got like mad at me and started like running around. I can't remember if he was like trying to melee me or if he had spells or something. But I was like, "Okay, I've crossed a line. I need to leave, sir."
Yeah.
But he was living in like a Fallout style vault. It had like a circular door and everything. And I was like, "Is this Hobbit hole or is this like do not open?" So yeah, it's neat to see their introduction there, and I recognize that they're more of like a species of their own. I also found the fox people. They live out in the desert somewhere. They're like sand foxes. I think they're called like Ferens or Ferins or something like that. I don't know, but they're another faction that exists out there that seem to be peaceful. They'll like wave at you a little bit when you walk up and that kind of thing.
Cool. I didn't know about them. I found all the hostile ones. Like I found the skeletons and the skeletons in the desert, and I found I can't remember what they're called, but in the desert they're bugs. The one that I saw was a seeker. Looks like a giant hornet that kind of attacks you, but it has a poison damage, but it looks like it has a mask on, and it looks not like an animal. It looks more like it's got a culture to it. And in the memories in the Forgotten Temple, they have their own little segment, and there's like 6 of them or something like that. So I've got a funny feeling I'm going to run into more bugs as I explore the desert more. And the Trorks, they essentially look like trolls. And those guys I did encounter out in the world, and they're not friendly at all. They're also huge, and that's something that I really enjoyed about the mobs in the game as you're exploring and finding new races. A couple of the Quebecs are taller than you. A lot of them are shorter, like Ewoks, but some of them are taller than you. The Trorks are at least head and shoulders taller than you. Like they are big. And the same thing with the bears and the, what are they called? Moss mouths. They look kind of like Appa, like an angry Appa. Yeah. And they're docile, like they run away from you, but they're just huge. They make a sniffer look like a small truck.
You ever find any of the Yetis in the snowy area? Yeah, they're huge too. That was the first time I was like, oh, this is a rough like encounter for me. This doesn't feel like the best matchup, but I cheesed that guy with a bow from a distance and felt no problem with that. Like that was fine by me.
Same here. There was another one that I saw too. I don't remember whether I saw it and ran away. I feel like I saw it and was like, I have too full of an inventory to mess with this. Like I've been adventuring for an hour. I really don't.
Is it one of the like floating guys where they're like in the dark a lot of the time? They're kind of like strings coming off of them.
I avoided those. Those are called void eyes, and I tried to fight one when one spawned really close to home. I was like, okay, perfect. I emptied all my gear, and I thought I'm gonna go fight one of these things, and I died. And I was like, okay, they from a distance they're not so bad. You can kind of shoot them. They don't have a lot of health, but man, up close they hit like a truck, like 2 hits. And I was like, oh crap, okay. And the other thing that I saw was like it was a skeleton with a shield, but again it was like 2 times my size. It was very, very tall. Even from a distance, I was just like, nope, not right now. I need more freedom and more confidence that I'm not going to lose everything if I go in there. And I find that was interesting. The settings when you go into the world, you can change the day-night cycle. You can change whether you lose half your loot, all of your loot, or none of your loot when you die. And there was one other setting, I don't remember what it was. But the thing that I find more than the loot, because the loot will stay for 10 minutes, I think is roughly the timer on the entity items. Uh, so you can get to them usually to retrieve them. I missed once, and you forget just how wide the render distance is. So like if you are back
Mm.
home emptying your chests, like better to run back to your stuff, because if it takes you a while to get there, you might only just make it. But um, the durability. So when you die, you keep all your gear, like you keep your armor and your sword and stuff, but it takes like a 10 or 20% hit on the durability,
Yeah.
and it costs to repair those things. And then when you repair them, it loses 10% of its max durability. So you
Yeah,
can never repair it back to 100, which I thought was kind of frustrating.
that's some of the stuff I didn't like, and that's one of the things that I think is like maybe a lesson Hytale can take from Minecraft. You know, it's obviously
Right.
already taken a lot of its cues from survival games like Minecraft, if not just purely from Minecraft itself. And I recognize that this is absolutely an early access thing, and there's still gameplay balance and
Oh,
stuff
sure, yeah.
in the way, but I feel like it needs to make upgrades more worth your while, because in Minecraft, you think about the durability increase from iron to diamond tools is huge. Like, it's suddenly you've got a pickaxe that will last 5 times as long, whereas in Hytale, the jump from an iron pickaxe to a cobalt or a thorium pickaxe is only an additional 50 durability. It will mine faster, but that also means you're going to use it up more quickly as well. And so you end up with, again, repairs getting expensive. Like the repair kits will cost you iron, so you don't really want to use them until you've got a greater supply of iron and you're moving on to the higher tiers of material that are more expensive for you to craft, purely because of the rarity of the material and the fact that you're probably not setting up your base in a biome that has thorium and whatnot. But like, you know, the repair kits still take off like a fixed amount of durability right now. I think it's supposed to be in a range, but right now, yeah, it lops off some of the maximum durability of a thing. And you're only working with 300 durability anyway, so you know you mine 300 blocks and that's it. So I think, obviously, in Minecraft there are relatively few materials you can't mine without diamond. In Hytale, it seems to be much more based on the speed at which you can mine stuff. You can mine anything with a crude pickaxe. It just takes a lot longer. And so the incentive to upgrade is much more about saving you time than it is about having access to more groups of materials or, you know, a much greater amount of durability. But that's, I think, one of the reasons I didn't do more building, was that acquiring resources was pretty slow to begin with, and you go through pickaxes so quickly. And the interesting thing about this was that a friend of the show, James Turner, who appeared on episode 201, and in Minecraft, he punches chunks. He's the guy who like digs chunks all the way out to bedrock. He logged into Hytale this week and said, right, I'm going to try punching a chunk in Hytale, because this is another blocky game that's out. And then he quickly realized that, for one thing, Hytale's chunks are 32 by 32 in the code, not 16 by 16. And he was doing it by his sort of traditional rules for it, which is that you try and acquire all of the materials for your tools from the chunk. And so once he chopped down a few trees and picked up some rubble from the perimeter, he was like, okay, this is the boundary of it. He started mining a 32 by 32 area out with a crude pickaxe. And it turns out that you need to craft 7 of those before you can clear an area that large. Wow. And as soon as he started getting copper and stuff, he looked at the durability and he was like, okay, 50 more durability. So I've gone from needing 7 pickaxes to needing just over 5. But that's still a lot. And you're still going to be using copper every time. And if you're repairing them, then that takes the durability off. And so it feels a little bit limiting in terms of what you get from the upgrade process right now. We've already covered damage from weapons, not really scaling up that much as far as I have seen. So I find Hytale's tools a bit more punishing to use. And upgrades to workstations so that you can even craft some of those things also consume a vast amount of the resources that you want to be putting into those tools anyway. And so it feels like it's a little bit currently restrictive on what could be the creative sandbox element of the game, where player building is encouraged and some of that stuff. So one of the things I would like to see them do going forward is really take a leaf out of Minecraft's book when it comes to the increases in durability. And if they plan on letting players just mod in their own kind of tools and that kind of thing, that's fine. But I'm the person who's going to be playing the vanilla version of the game if I'm going to be playing anything. So I would really be interested in seeing them spread out the amount of, upgrades that you can make and make those upgrades feel a bit more worthwhile than just the aesthetics of it.
I agree. And I think that I would imagine a lot of that is early access woes, and that I also found that the lack of tooltips really didn't give me an indication as to where I needed to go to find thorium and to find cobalt. So the very little bits that I found, I did end up using to upgrade one of my tables. But then I was like, well, now I'm back to 0 thorium. So I can't even, I have access to a thorium pickaxe, but I can't make it because I can't find thorium. I didn't know where to go. It wasn't until they added some tooltips to the thorium armor, and I was like, oh, it negates poison damage. So maybe if I go where there's more poison enemies, I will find more thorium, which would make sense. Because that in World of Warcraft, you'd find a lot of things that would help you fight the stuff in that environment. So you'd get fire stuff from fire enemies, and if you needed fire armor, well, that's where you'd have to go.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And I actually completely skipped thorium and ended up going straight to cobalt for most of my gear upgrades, because I found that cobalt is surface level. You don't really have to dig for it. You can just find it hanging out on the side of mountains, and you can see it from the map. I discovered that after mining a half a stack. I was like, wait a minute, there's a little blue dot on the map. Is that actually cobalt? I think I might have said thorium there, but is that actually cobalt? And you go over to cobalt, and I double checked on the map. It's like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And as soon as I saw it on the map, I was like, okay, I see 6 more deposits right now. So I was able to get 2.5 stacks of cobalt in no time. And it took me an entire stream to find 20 thorium, and I hardly mined any of it. The thorium was all in chests in desert temples. I had to go and raid desert stuff, which was cool. That was almost more fun than just going in a mine and mining out of the walls. It was cooler to kind of go in and fight a couple of enemies and then rob the place and then run away. I thought that was kind of cool. So I feel like there would be better if there was, like you said, reasons for the upgrade, make it worthwhile, but also thorium found in deserts, or found in hot climates, don't have to be so specific about it. Cobalt found in cold environments, and the blue of the cobalt, you can kind of guess. I can't remember the name of the red mineral. It's either
adamantium is what
adamantium
it is.
Is the, or adamantite is the red one. So I'm guessing that's probably on the volcanic islands and stuff like that. But the thorium was green, so nothing about it said go to the desert. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it wasn't yellow. So yeah, I had a little bit of trouble with that. But I'm looking forward to them having a little bit more of a explanation built into the UI, into the tooltips on different things. I discovered just from trial and error during my first few streams about the differences between softwood, hardwood, lightwood, darkwood, redwood, etc.
Yeah.
And it wasn't tree specific. There are groups of trees that are all soft, groups of trees that are all hard. It doesn't matter which you get, they will all craft the same thing. And now, as of Saturday, there's a tooltip that indicates it's a birch log, it's a softwood. It's a maple log, it's a hardwood or a redwood or whatever they have. So that's nice. So when the farming workbench was asking for specifically softwood for an upgrade, and I had all hardwood around. It's I don't know, where am I going to find softwood? I don't even know where to look. So that stuff was a welcome tooltip. So I'm hoping more for the mining and the crafting stuff. It would be great to have a little bit more indication as to where to get things. Some things were really cool, the lore tooltips on the void essence and the crystals was really fun. I've got some jewels like topaz and zephyr that are the hearts of fallen golems. I was that's cool. Wonder what that means. But we don't really have anything other than just a lore explanation. So I'd like to see more development there in terms of a clearer line for the tech tree. It's nice that you get to go to an explorer to look for stuff, but it would be nice to at least have a direction. I don't know about you. Did you find that your warmer biomes were south and that your colder biomes were north?
Yeah, that was the case on my map at least. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. So That at least makes sense for anybody in the northern hemisphere. I
Yeah,
don't know.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be backwards if you're in Australia. Um, but that's something that I think was cool to see. I think I mentioned earlier that somebody in my chat had mentioned that they had to travel a really long time before they found a desert. So sometimes I guess the generation in the randomly generating echoes of Orbis can be just bad luck. Like you're kind of, far away from stuff and it takes a while to get there. So there are a few things there. I think the other thing that I would like to see in terms of a lesson for Minecraft was some of the UI improvements and quality of life in Hytale. Things
Yeah.
like I didn't find the sort button took me out of my RPG experience. These are just things I like in
Hmm.
video games. I can't remember the name of the button, but it's a button that says like if you have anything that's already in this chest, this one button will take all of those things and put it in the chest in the appropriate stacks if there's room with one click. Apparently,
Yeah.
Stardew Valley has that as well.
Stardew
And
has it. Terraria has it. It's usually called
right,
like Quick Stack or something like that.
something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. So that's in the game, which is nice. Uh, I did find some hiccups. Like you can't take something like when you make charcoal in a furnace by burning sticks to smelt something, you can't take the charcoal directly from the output of the furnace and put it into the input of the furnace. You have to first put it into your inventory and then put it into the furnace. So there's
Yeah.
some sort of code that changes when it becomes like output to item and then item to input. Like you have to
Yeah.
like do that process. So there's a couple little things that are just like shortcuts that happen in other games that make sense. I do like when you open up one of the crafting inventories, I think it's the building workbench, that it will highlight in your inventory the kind of things that you can put into the bench. So
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
glance,
That's smart.
yeah, at a glance you go, oh, okay, so wait a minute, Azure wood doesn't go in this. I can't build anything with Azure wood. What the heck is Azure wood used for? You find out later that it's more magic and more, you know, more utility in that way. So it's like, okay, well, that's cool. But I feel like the um, multi-hand utility as well was really good. And I know a lot of people had a frustration with it at first because it did not work the same way that it works in Minecraft, where you can put torches in your offhand and mine with your right hand and then like place
Yeah.
torches on the wall. You kind of had to have one torch in your offhand for light and the rest of your torches in your hotbar and kind of swap that way. But now it works just like Minecraft as of Saturday.
Hmm.
You can have all of your torches in your offhand and your sword or pick in the right and then place it. And the offhand also has multiple utility slots. So you can tap Z and cycle through them. At the moment, I only have two. It's a torch or a candle and my shield. And then you can hold Z and it brings up a radial menu. And I've brought up a radial menu as something I feel like Minecraft could take from games like Satisfactory and now Hytale as a way to help with inventory and have your tools and stuff there. You can't put your tools in your offhand in Hytale, but you can put at least your shield and your torches to get those things out, or other light source. It doesn't have to be a torch. I have not run into additional utility items. It has to have the tooltip utility to go in your offhand in Hytale, and I've not run into that. But if I do, there's I think spots for four. So there's four things I don't have to have in my immediate inventory if they're just things I need occasionally on my offhand. And being able to toggle through them was pretty good. I might move the key. I found the Z key was a little bit hard to hit. I would frequently hit the camera by accident when I was in combat trying to switch to my shield. Um, but I thought those UI changes were really cool. And the last one was something that I think we've seen in some Minecraft mods, which is chest reach crafting from chests that are either next to or in the vicinity of a crafting table. There are
Yes.
pros and cons to that too, which I find was weird. So they upped it from 7 blocks and 2 blocks, so 7 horizontally and 2 blocks vertically, to I think it's now 14 and 5
Hmm.
vertically. So the potential there is really, really cool. So 5 vertically, like you could have a basement with nothing but your chests in it and all of your
Yeah.
workbenches on your main floor, and they would be pulling from the inventory below, which is really cool. But some things craft with any wood or any stone, and you can't necessarily choose what they're using. So I was crafting chests and it was using azure wood because it starts with an A, and it was probably the first thing in the chest when I reorganized it. So I had this really special wood that I was using for chests, which I didn't want to do. So for stuff like that, it's better to have the wood you want to use in your inventory. But I thought it was great for things like farming and some of the workbenches that has like recipes that require a lot of weird things that you don't necessarily have all in the same chest naturally. It was great to just have those at hand. And I like that ability. And for Minecraft, that doesn't necessarily have to be just like a UI change. I feel like with Minecraft, with things that they have with hoppers and item elevators with bubble columns and moving things around with water, I feel like you could have something like that in Minecraft where it does pull from multiple chests, but have it be gameplay. Like have it not be built into the chest. Have it be something that you have to, a system you have to craft. Because the inventiveness of the Minecraft community, I feel like there would just be a lot of gameplay there to not just make good button, but like craft something unique, and then that way players could make it as complex or as simple as they want.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good note, and I think the other thing I want from Hytale with regards to its relationship to Minecraft is obviously going to come through in early access a little bit, is the consistency of style throughout the whole thing. And this varies a little bit for me because I find one of my problems with this kind of presentation that Hytale has is the fact that the world is blocky. And a lot of the stuff in the world has been designed with a bit more of a blocky aesthetic in mind, but goes out of its way to try and avoid looking blocky. Think about the animal designs, for example. Like, a lot of them are big and square, like the moss horns and whatnot. But then some of the models are so detailed that I start to understand why the Minecraft artist decided to, like, revise the model of the horse to look more blocky in consistency with the style of some of the other stuff in Minecraft. And Minecraft's whole thing is like pixel graphics, right? So that means the textures are pixels, the menu buttons are pixels, the font it uses everywhere is a pixel font. And at least on Java Minecraft this is. There's some stuff that's like, the edges are smoothed off a little bit on Bedrock Edition, I know, but I think some subtle stylization can really go a long way to making everything in the Hytale experience feel cohesive. And that comes down to things like font choice and like UI design and things like that. It all has to feel like it is of a piece with the world. I think about the amount of self-referential stuff that they're able to do in Minecraft with like the paintings that are like two villagers and they clearly look blocky in the painting. It's not trying to render a realistic looking portrait of a villager. The fact that zombies design is based on the default Steve skin, you know, that feels like a self-referential thing. And I feel like once Hytale gets going and it has a better idea of its own personality, it can start to use some of those things to really help the whole experience feel cohesive. Because that stuff helps with immersion. And I feel like one of the reasons Minecraft stays minimalist is that it has this sort of minimalist feel to the landscape and to the mechanics and to the blocks and everything. Whereas with Hytale, obviously comparisons to Minecraft are going to be inevitable when you have this blocky landscape, but you start to wonder if the animals aren't all that blocky and the trees, while they've been made with blocky leaves, have all of the kind of fluffy edges to them and stuff. Why bother making the landscape blocky to begin with, other than just to invite comparisons to Minecraft? I think back to games like Enshrouded now, where yes, the building happens on a grid and there are pieces that you can snap together and you build things in terms of blocks, but all of it looks like realistic. A lot of it looks like a stylized version of realism, where the landscape is sort of a continuous rolling thing that looks a lot more like the natural real world. And you sort of wonder why the voxel aesthetic applied so heavily to Hytale's landscape when so many of the features of that world are also moving away from the voxel aesthetic. And I really want them to like work on what sets them apart from Minecraft, which I think they're already starting to do this early into the game's experience. But I think the creatures being a bit more fluid and all of that stuff, I sort of wonder why the landscape can't also be that way. And so I wonder if there's a few more ways that they can distinguish themselves from Minecraft's world generation that really feel like, this feels like it's its own landscape rather than something that looks on the surface very much like a Minecraft clone. And then when you dig deeper, you realize that there's a little bit more life in it than that.
I will push back on the animals and the mobs. I think that they maintain the blocky aesthetic, but because they've got more joints and the models are more complicated, that sets it apart from Minecraft, and I think that's a strength. I don't want Minecraft cows in Hytale at all. Like I don't think that dialing back the models would help. With the
It's
world,
not necessarily for me that I want them to dial back the animals. It's that I want the landscape to meet the level of quality that the animals have. And
right?
I sort of don't understand why the world remains that blocky when the animals look so much better not being blocky, or at least not
Yeah.
being that blocky, right?
I feel like the set dressing does. Mushrooms and plants and the blocky, like the models of the crops, they like the tomatoes are square.
Yeah.
The chili peppers are not square, but they're like long boxes. Stuff like that I think helps. I really like how they take certain things. The mushrooms are a really good example because they are still blocky, but there's several blocks that make up a mushroom as
Hmm.
opposed to just a pixel plane in Minecraft, which is for me, I have a texture pack that turns mushrooms in Minecraft into something that looks like a tangible block as opposed to just like this flat pixel plane.
Yeah.
Um, I think that I think it's accessibility. Like I think it's like when you load into Hytale and it is a voxel landscape, I think you just immediately know how to interact with it, and I think that's a strength as far as getting people in. Strategically, I think that it's going to be a lot easier for Minecraft players to pick up.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't want angled landscape. Like I wouldn't want triangles or anything like that in the landscape in Hytale, because then it would just becomes like, well, if you're gonna go that far, like why not just have like a perfectly, like why not have it be like a Zelda and just have like rolling hills, with the same way that other video games are. Because I do find that very strange in other games where the landscape is smooth, like it is like a natural kind of looking place, but then when you start to manipulate it, it comes out in blocks, and that I find very
Hmm.
odd. Whereas this, at least I feel like, because when you break a block, the whole thing kind of shakes and then comes out. You kind of understand how it works. Um, I guess one of the things they could do in Hytale is that they do have vertical slabs, and they do have slabs in the game. Not that I've ever seen those rendering the world naturally as far as the landscape goes. I've seen them in structures, but not in the landscape. So I could see some of the rock outcrops or other things in the landscape having slabs on them. Like that could be maybe something that they could do to differentiate the landscape. But for the most part, like I feel like the textures and the diversity of the textures in the landscape really feel much different than Minecraft. Like I think about like a Minecraft plains going into like a stone cliff, and there's two or three textures: grass, dirt, and stone, maybe some andesite. Whereas in this, I feel like there is the grass into the marble, there'd be a bunch of other stuff overlapping it, and it does feel more diverse in that way. Or even if it's just, I think it might be just the topography and the way that they gradually go from one to the other, that it feels smoother.
They have the overlapping borders between blocks because they're working on like a larger kind
Yeah.
of texture model. Then they can have a lot
Hmm.
more blending between blocks that looks better than it does in like a 16 by 16 Minecraft texture. So I think in that
Yeah.
case, like the expanded textures like really work for it, you know?
Yeah. I would think that they could also lean into the lore, and that would help differentiate them from
Yeah,
Minecraft as well. Because
I
Minecraft is
agree.
really a true sandbox. Like they kind of drop you a little bit of lore, but it's kind of like it's lore with a like quotation marks. Like it's up for a lot of interpretation. Whereas with Hytale, especially in the adventure mode, I'd imagine there's gonna be more of a story
Yeah.
and more reason for what you're doing. Um, I in particular would like more things like little quests or stuff. Like when I had to go out and get leather, I didn't want to kill the cute animals, and even the wolves, I wasn't a big fan of just kind of like killing them for the sake of killing them. If it was attacking me, sure, but if I didn't bother it, it didn't bother me. Whereas if something like World of Warcraft, they'd give you a quest like, "Hi, I'm Farmer, Bob, and these wolves are killing my sheep. Could you give me a hand and kill some of these wolves so I don't lose all my herd?" And then you feel a little bit more like, well, I'm doing a favor for somebody, and it's part of the quest, it's part of a mission. You feel like you have more of a reason to go to the wilderness and just kind of kill wild animals. Um, and so I feel like something like that would help, but that could be more of an adventure mode thing that's coming. I don't know, as far as the Echoes of Orbis, the exploration mode goes. But I feel like leaning into that would help, because it would give players reasons to construct certain things. You could decide what factions you like. Are Torques just like misunderstood, or are they just bullies? Like are like the Fox people, like do they have a quarrel with another race that then makes you side with them and then change the way that you play the game? Like I think that could be really interesting. I saw the Quebecs had little bunny corrals, and the bunnies were basically being bred and farmed. I don't know what for. The Quebecs don't seem to be all that aggressive, although they do have spears with them all the time. I didn't see anybody kill a bunny, but like the implication was like they were breeding them for a reason. So like, does that then make the player feel less bad about breeding bunnies? Like, so there's a bunch of different stuff that I thought was interesting, and I'd like to know more about the cultures, because that's something we don't really have in Minecraft, is like knowing about what makes an Enderman tick, or why illagers are the way they are. Like what differentiated the illagers from the villagers, we don't know. Whereas they could have that opportunity in Hytale to explain that kind of stuff, which could be fun.
Yeah, I think really the takeaway for Hytale is you do you. Like I think
100%.
the greater steps this game takes to differentiate itself from Minecraft as an experience and provide something different for players, I think the more players are going to be attracted to that, because it does the stuff that Minecraft doesn't, not just mechanically, but in terms of storytelling opportunities and the kind of stuff that Minecraft has had to dedicate spin-off games to really telling their own stories within the world of Minecraft. I feel like Hytale has the opportunity to do natively, like in-house. So I think that's kind of a neat opportunity for it. And I think they're doing a very good job right now of not letting that lore limit player imagination, but still making it a part of the world. So I think we'll both be keeping track of Hytale. If not, I don't know if I'll be playing it much this week. I'm sure you'll be dipping in and out whenever you want to, but we'll probably have a chance to talk about it more in future once the game is a little bit further down the line, and see if there's anything else that we can reflect on in the context of this still very much being a Minecraft podcast. But this Minecraft podcast is now coming to an end, at least for this episode, because that's where we're going to wrap up this one. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we have talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and the Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live as we record it in Discord every Monday. We also have our monthly hangouts and quarterly hangouts that you can join if you want to get the behind-the-scenes of the podcast or share what you've been up to in Minecraft that month. We're currently at 266 patrons, which is up an additional 2 from last week. There is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineers. That's Kina Beald, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. And a quick shout out to Murphy Lives, who is a new annual subscriber to the Patreon. Thank you so much for your support.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. It's free. You can find us on social media at The Spawn Chunks. New episodes are available on Mondays on your favorite podcasting platforms, with video versions going out on YouTube and on Spotify. The RSS feed is on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you get the render distance, the extended version of the program.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series. The VOD of my Hytale first, 5 hours is also up there, and that will be on my VODs channel at Pixel VODs on YouTube, if you're interested in catching that a little bit later. I am also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point everyone towards the Citadel Cafe, which is recording a new episode this week. That'll be 501. Stephen and I are going to be looking forward to what we're going to be watching and talking about in 2026. Trailers, new movies, things like that. There's a lot of teasers for Avengers Doomsday out right now, so we're going to dive into those and see what we think. I'm also streaming from Tuesday to Friday at 9 a.m. and Saturdays at 1. You can expect both Minecraft, probably some Hytale in that rotation, and I'm not sure yet what Lego set I'm going to pick up in the new year, but one is coming, I think, and that's normally what I do on Friday. So lots happening over at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and the grass is always greener on the other games.